Hi, I'm Mary Devlin and I'm the business spokesperson at Alliance for Unity. Having spent most of my life running my own businesses in Japan, the United States and now in Scotland, it makes me really angry to see the way Scottish Government treats businesses here in Scotland. I remember starting my first business in Tokyo, making what went on to become Japan's #1 English magazine. Like a lot of business owners, to get started we put in all the savings we had. It wasn't enough, but we worked really hard and we took a huge risk, taking on credit and debt. We gradually started to employ a few people. It took a while, but slowly over many years we built a profitable business, employing 40 people. We're still in touch with many of those people today because we all worked hard together to create a successful business. It is hard work, it is extremely stressful, and it is full of risk, which is why I really feel for a lot of businesses in Scotland today. Our current Scottish Government just doesn't seem to understand how businesses work or the consequences of their often ad hoc policies on businesses. But then again, how could they? Most of the ministers and Scottish Cabinet members have either never worked or barely ever worked in a business. None of the people in Scottish Government making decisions for Scottish businesses have ever grown a successful business of their own or knows what it takes to create jobs. Nicola Sturgeon was a solicitor. Kate Forbes, our finance minister in charge of a £32 billion annual budget, is a 30-year-old whose total finance and work experience is working for 2 years in a bank. Who in their right minds ever thought a 30-year-old with 2 years' experience should be in charge of running a country's £32 billion budget? If I had a small company with 3 or 4 employees and I was looking for someone to take care of our accounts, she wouldn't even be asked for an interview. She doesn't have the skills or the experience. Our Economy Secretary, Fiona Hislop, is a long-term politician for over 20 years, and my counterpart in the SNP, Minister for Business, Jamie Hepburn, has never worked in a business, never mind grown one himself, and he has never created jobs. He, like so many of his colleagues in the SNP, is a career politician. They study history or politics at university, never work in the real world, but are happy to keep on collecting their generous salaries and expenses. Scottish industry and businesses are the engine of the economy, and they should not be tinkered with by amateurs. During my over 30 years of working in multinationals and running my own companies, I have learned a lot about what it takes to employ people and keep a business running. I know how hard it can be. Cash flow is king. I spent every day for years making decisions based on when money was coming in and when it had to be paid out. Our SNP politicians have never had to do this. Kate Forbes has never had to do this in earnest. Scotland's shortfall of £2 billion a year is financed by the UK government. Has Kate Forbes or Fiona Hislop, Jamie Hepburn or even Nicola Sturgeon ever had sleepless nights wondering how to keep a business going, how to meet the payroll, how to pay the loans and creditors, how to keep costs down and profits up? This is on top of looking after staff and the many other skills needed to run a successful company. And that's over and above the main business of the company. The stress and the financial risks involved in running a business can sometimes seem too much, but it's also very satisfying to create jobs, see people enjoying their work, and know that you've grown a successful business. Our SNP career politicians know nothing of this either. This is why, last week, when Nicola Sturgeon ordered most of Scotland's bars and restaurants to close with less than 2 days' notice, I watched and listened with astonishment and anger. Of course we're in a pandemic and common sense measures need to be taken. Washing our hands, keeping our distance, wearing a mask. But what we don't need is arbitrary ad hoc policies targeted solely at a particular sector with little and very contradictory evidence on whether closing bars and restaurants will even make a difference to the number of people catching coronavirus. The hospitality industry employs over 200,000 people and contributes £4 billion a year to the Scottish economy. What Nicola and her astoundingly inexperienced colleagues fail to understand is that you can't just order a business to close and then expect them to be able to open up again at some undetermined time in the future. Sadly, many of these businesses will never open again, and the consequences of that will be painful, not just for them, but for all of us. It may have taken Nicola Sturgeon just a couple of minutes to order our bars and restaurants to close with scant notice, but for many of these businesses, the repercussions may last years. There are so many issues that they, through no fault of their own, have been left to deal with. What happens to their employees? Will the government fund their wages? How much and when? Where can they get timely advice? I bet their accountants and lawyers' phones are ringing off the hook. Then there are all the costs and bills that still have to be paid. Rent, council taxes, loans, creditors, all the utilities, electricity, heating, internet, phones, etc., etc. Where is the money coming from for those if the businesses are closed? And what about all the fresh food these businesses may have brought or ordered? There wasn't enough time to use up stocks or cancel orders, so meat, poultry, fish, dairy products, vegetables, fruit, they would all have to be thrown away. Such a waste. This alone would cost some businesses thousands of pounds. For the employees working in these bars and restaurants, they have to wait and wonder whether they will have lost their jobs. If the business tries to keep their job, when will they get paid and how much? If they lose their job, when will they ever find another, given that thousands and thousands of other people have lost their jobs and are looking for work? They also have bills to pay: rent, mortgages, electricity, gas, credit cards, loans, and it's coming up to Christmas, a horrible time to be gravely worried about money. Nicola Sturgeon promised to pay out £40 million to the hospitality businesses affected. But how? When? Was that just for these first 2 weeks? And will there be more? The Scottish Government is already sitting on £1 billion the UK Government sent for Scottish businesses, but Scottish businesses have not received it. Where is the money? And when will it be distributed to the many Scottish businesses who need it now so desperately? Nicola Sturgeon said during her daily party political broadcast that it was for 2 weeks, but 2 weeks have come and gone, and there's no sign of when it will end. It may go on for months to come. These businesses need to be compensated fairly by the Scottish Government, and they need to receive the money in days, not weeks or months. Now, most people who start a business so that they can take control of their own destiny. If they succeed, they earned it. If they fail, they blame themselves. But now we have a government that is pulling the rug from under the feet of businesses that have worked very hard and spent a lot of money to comply with every safety regulation and every piece of advice the government has given them. I know very well how it feels to think you might be about to lose your business. I have been in that position several times for different reasons. It's very difficult to convey that overwhelming, gut-wrenching feeling, the extreme stress and anxiety, and all the fears of the consequences that go with it. This week, a client of mine, an award-winning restaurant owner in Glasgow, posted a video on Facebook showing many of the boarded up and permanently closed bars and restaurants in Glasgow. It's quite hard to watch. In the video, he says, "The government has imposed a lockdown on us, and I don't understand how it makes sense. We have absolutely no idea how to survive." I have been back in Scotland for nearly 5 years now, and I am appalled at the number of incompetent, inexperienced, unqualified, and hard of thinking nationalist MSPs we have in Scottish Government these days. There is no one at the centre of power in Scotland who is looking out for the interests of businesses. Earlier in the summer, Sir Tom Hunter advised having a lead business advisor having as much access to decision making as the medical and scientific advisors. That role could perhaps have been filled by Steve Dunlop, the leader of Scottish Enterprise, but he has just resigned. Leading business figures reveal a consistent picture of frustration, a lack of trust and poor communication that has deteriorated rapidly during this pandemic, especially since Derek Mackay, former Finance and Economy Secretary, was forced to quit earlier this year, shamed by the scandal of sending inappropriate texts to a 16-year-old boy. The Scotland I left was a very different place from the Scotland of today. I was becoming more and more alarmed at rising nationalism in Scotland and the possibility of the SNP increasing their seats at the election next May. They will use this to claim a mandate for another referendum for separation from the UK. This would be a disaster on every level, economically and socially. I would not want to live in that Scotland. So I chose to join Alliance for Unity. I admire the group of candidates we are putting together. Our qualified, experienced, learned, competent and clever candidates stand in stark contrast to the unqualified, inexperienced, incompetent and corrupt SNP and Green MSPs we have here in the Scottish Government. Help me fight back. Support me as your candidate for Central Scotland and give your list vote to Alliance for Unity in your area. Let's get Scotland back to business.